Hello and welcome to Easy Everyday Gluten-Free Bakes. I'm so excited to get started, and we're going to kick things off straight away with a delicious chocolate log just in time for Christmas. So let's get started. Here I've got 100 grams of caster sugar weighed out ready into the bowl I'm going to use to whisk everything. I've got my 4 eggs. Always break those into a separate bowl, so if you get any shell, it's not a big problem to fish it out. It's a bit easier in a small bowl than already in with the sugar. So in they go, and I'm going to whisk these until they're light and frothy. So I like to use a big stand mixer, but you really don't have to have this. You can use a hand mixer. Let me just show you mine. This works perfectly well. And if you're feeling strong, you can also do it by hand, but it will take a lot longer. The important thing is getting the consistency right, which I'll show you in a minute. So off we go. So this has been going now for about 4 minutes. Let me just show you there. It's really fluffy and foamy. Can you see? So you need those bubbles. Just keep going. So the next thing I'm going to do is sieve the flour, the cocoa and the psyllium husk into the egg and sugar mixture. So firstly the flour. Now I like to use a brand called Free. It does have a raising agent in it already. That's really important, but any brand will do. And the key is really to experiment until you find the one that you like. Here's some cocoa powder. There's nothing added to that at all. It's just the cocoa powder. And then the psyllium husk. So let's talk about this. This is a powder. It's kind of grainy, a little bit grainy, flaky, and it comes in a big bag, about half a kilo or 250 grams perhaps, from health food stores or on Amazon. And this honestly is my single best find in terms of gluten-free baking. It will absolutely transform your sponge cake, any kind of sponge cake. It's like the best thing I've ever found, honestly. So instead of psyllium husk, I highly recommend this, and you'll find I use it later on in the course. A bag will cost £7 or £8. What's that, $9–10? And it might sound quite a lot, but actually I've had a bag for over a year and I'm not halfway through it yet, because you only need a very small amount. So in this recipe, it's half a teaspoon, and we just pop that in. It's sort of, I mean, I'm no scientist, but it adds, dare I say it, a wheaty kind of wholesome flavour. It combats that ricey taste you get with a lot of gluten-free flours, and I cannot recommend it enough. So if you don't have it right now, just put a little bit of xanthan gum in there instead, and it will be absolutely fine. But you are slightly missing out, so I highly recommend that. So all I'm doing now is pressing all of those final few lumps through the sieve. Oop, that was a hard bit of cocoa powder. It dries sometimes, it's not a big deal. Okay, and that's done. And then we're going to fold the dry in with the wet. So round the edge, down the middle, round the edge, down the middle. You mustn't whisk it or beat it, because you'll end up knocking out all that nice air that you've just beaten into the egg and sugar mixture. So you can see it's coming together. It will gradually turn a nice chocolatey colour, but just take your time. Don't be tempted to just give it a good mix. You've got to get the dry and the wet ingredients incorporated whilst keeping it nice and foamy. You may have one or two little lumps left at the end. That's really not a big problem. You won't notice those, but you don't want big streaks of dry ingredients. It's nearly done. You've just got to keep digging down. And what I'm using is a plastic spatula because it will bend to the shape of the bowl and just help. There's a big bubble of it, look. That will just help incorporate everything. I think we're about done. So like I say, if you get the odd little bit of dry flour or cocoa popping up, it's not the end of the world, but you want as much of that incorporated as you can. You can hear it frothing. You need to keep all those bubbles in. So that's ready. Here is my tin. So it's a Swiss roll tin. This recipe is designed for this kind of size. This is 9 inches by 12 inches. I think I got it in Lakeland in the UK, but it doesn't matter where you get your tin from, just this kind of size is good. And you'll see on the recipe the centimetre equivalent as well. I've put some grease-proof paper in there. I've left it a little bit long at the sides because later that will help us lift it out. I haven't bothered to grease the tin. It seemed to just sit in there quite nicely. That's just a bit of water because I washed the tin before we started. So now we'll just scrape all of this into the tin. Again, be gentle with it. You don't want to knock out all the air, but you do want to scrape around so you don't waste any. There we are. Just spread it gently into the corners. It's foaming nicely, and as it bakes, it will rise. So I put my oven on, check the PDF recipe for oven temperatures, and I also recommend the water bath. You don't have to do that, but it's another thing that helps with all these issues we have or can have with a gluten-free cake. So all I've done, I've taken an old tin like this one. I've put about 2 centimetres or an inch, half an inch of tap water in the bottom, and that is sitting in the bottom of my oven. And as everything bakes, that will create a little bit of steam and add a bit of moisture to your baking cake. And again, that's something I highly recommend, whatever you're baking, cake-wise, that is. You don't do it with biscuits or anything you want to crunch with, but certainly for this, that's what adds some lovely sort of squidginess to it. So that's ready to go into the oven. So let's make the ganache. I've got 400 grams of chocolate here. I've used 200 grams of milk and 200 grams of dark. That's my preference. You can change that around. Try what you like. Chocolate obviously comes in lots of different forms at lots of different price points. For this kind of thing, I just use supermarket chocolate. It's absolutely fine, saves quite a lot of money, but I would recommend you start there and work your way up and find the brand and the type that works best for you. I have 200 mils of double cream, and the first thing I'm going to do is heat the cream in the microwave in short bursts of about 30 seconds at a time until you get some steam, and that means it's got to the temperature that has sort of sterilized it. I'm no scientist, but that then means it doesn't have to be in the fridge when you're done. So I'm going to do that now. So I've just got this out of the microwave. I don't know if you can see, but that is now gently steaming. and I'm going to pour that onto the chocolate. This will start to melt the chocolate. Just give it a mix and make sure it's all covered. And then I'm going to pop that back in the microwave until it is really melted. But again, do it in short bursts of 20 to 30 seconds at a time, just so that it doesn't overheat. Now that the chocolate ganache is ready, I've just put some greaseproof paper in the top of the bowl to seal it a little bit, stop a big skin forming whilst it cools. So this has just come out of the oven and we're going to turn it out. So you have to be a little bit brave. It has cooled down for a couple of minutes, which is why I'm touching it. We're going to turn it upside down onto a spare piece of greaseproof paper. There we go. Don't be afraid of it. And now we're just going to remove this backing paper. Just be gentle and make sure it's not completely sticking. You will lose a little bit, but it doesn't matter at all. There we go. And then we're going to roll it back up with the paper inside. Don't be afraid of it, just go for it. Not too tight. But what you end up with is a roll with the paper stopping it or sticking together. And then I'm going to put that here to cool down. The chocolate ganache is cooling as well. And when it's all cold, we'll come back and assemble it. So my cake is cold and the ganache is cool. It needs to be spreadable, but room temperature is about right. So I'm going to unroll the cake first. There we are. Remove the paper from the ganache. Give it a bit of a stir. It's nice and soft, but not runny. We'll be able to spread that nice and easily. So I'm going to take about a third of it, just enough to put a thin layer all over the cake. There we go. Just spread it on. Now, if you don't want to put ganache inside, you could put buttercream, you could put fresh cream whipped. It's down to personal taste, really. But you've got a nice layer. Let's add a bit more. Oh, there's an unmelted lump of chocolate there. Just take that out. Doesn't matter. There we go. So that's a nice covering. Then we're going to roll it back up without the paper this time. Pop it on a nice plate. There. If you keep the fold underneath, that will hold it all together. I'm now going to take the rest of the ganache, give it a bit of a stir. I'm going to spread it all over. go. So all over the top, down the sides. It's really not something that has to be perfect. Just get it all covered. The ends as well, or you can leave those as they are. I'm using a palette knife. It's at a slight angle. I find this easier, but just a normal knife will be absolutely fine. Just keep pushing it down and along until you're covered. You could leave the end open like that if you want to, or you can seal it in. I like to seal it in because it keeps it fresh. If none of the sponge is showing, it will stay softer for longer. And that's what we want, really. That's just about done. That looks pretty good as it is. We'll get a fork and make a log sort of bark pattern all the way along. You can have fun with this. It doesn't need to be perfect. Just get a good covering. There we are. And then finally, I like to use some icing sugar and give it a coating of snow. So here it is, finished. Gorgeous. And I bet you that if you give it to somebody who doesn't have to be gluten-free, they're not going to turn you down.